Hey guys, this is Joe from TruthStream. Basically, I am here to introduce our interview with Laura Eisenhower on the Grassroots Warrior Network. And what is the Grassroots Warrior Network? Well, as many of you have seen on TruthStream, there's a gentleman that comes on our show named Kevin Hoyt. And Kevin has put together a channel. It's on Rumble, and it is GRWN, or Grassroots Warrior Network. And you'll notice the logo is a little ant. It's kind of a maroon color, but it's 21 different anchors basically coming together and putting in one show a week and to help build a community and a place for people to find out about other people and, lock arms and help us get the truth out there and share our stories, share these stories with the world. And we're watching it grow. So anyway, we're proud to be a part of it. We're proud of Kevin and all those that are affiliated with the Grassroots Warrior Network. And anyway, without further ado, here's Laura Eisenhower on the Grassroots Warrior Network. Cheers. Welcome to TruthStream. We are here once again with the amazing Laura Eisenhower, whom we met in person at the event in Shasta in the summer of 2021, along with Brad Olson, Alex Collier, Michael Jaco, Tracy Jaco, Nick Alvair, so many great people. And Laura... What's that?
It was a good time.
It was a great time.
Yeah.
That's right. So Laura, thanks for joining us once again.
Oh, it's always great to be with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Right on. We're going to jump into so many cool things, and I'm going to just sit back for a bit and have Scott and Laura kick this off. So please.
Well, you just made me think back to that event, and Laura, you were probably my favorite speaker, and that I laughed harder watching you. You're so entertaining. But
oh, thank you. Gosh.
Yeah. So you've been working on your book. What are your latest observations? The world's in kind of a crazy state, and I'm curious.
It is. I've been trying to get this book out for a good decade, and I almost feel like it's more relevant to read now than maybe back then because of the craziness going on in the world. It's called Awakening the Truth Frequency, and it's not about one truth, right? I think anybody who thinks they have all the answers is probably too much in their ego. I get as close to the truth as I can when it comes to what would be more maybe factual because it has taken place beyond a reasonable doubt because of the sources that I've connected with. But it's more about, just what awakening really means. There's many levels of it, right? There's understanding what's been going on behind the scenes, the crimes against humanity, things like SRA and MK Ultra and geoengineering. I mean, the stuff that I don't know why people aren't noticing. Just basic common sense. How can it be a theory when it's right in front of your face, right? And then with all the books being written, all the victims of these, families or these ritual abuses and MK Ultra that have come forward, I bring all that in and just, what our junk DNA is truly made of, some things about our galactic history, but all sort of surrounding the inner work. And I reference Eisenhower's final speech about being a knowledgeable and alert citizenry and things that took place during his administration that helped to set up a lot of the positive military, like the White Hats and Ike's Force, USMC Special Section, and also the Earth Alliance, and some things that sort of were the baton that was passed down to others that he helped to initiate, which I feel also had its origins in some of the earlier presidents before all these world wars and, sort of him briefing Kennedy and then Kennedy being assassinated, and how the three-letter organizations have basically groomed people to be in this position with at least 22 levels of above top secret, even above the president. Why is administration was so compromised? So on top of sort of the greater awakening of what it means to switch on dormant DNA and all the assaults and the things that are trying to get in the way, I shed a lot of light on his connection with Val Thor as well, and all the blame that has been placed on him in regards to ET government treaties, and how I've got multiple sources, including Alex Collier, Dan Cooper from the Earth Alliance, and Elena Denon, and actually other sources saying that MJ-12 signed it behind his back. So it's been very interesting because there's the internal waking up, but then there's recovering from or digging deep into where history is being rewritten, and how after Project Paperclip, that infiltration of our educational systems, our medical industry, Hollywood, the government political structure, and all the power structures pretty much that spread its tentacles all over the world to have these individuals that represent these kind of family members that have altars and aren't even really acting upon any sort of clarity and coherence within themselves, that are operating a dark agenda, where that has impacted us and where people aren't noticing this, and how the history books don't say any of this. It only says we won the Second World War, which gives people a false sense of freedoms that we hear in like the anthems or the pledges. And where it's all turning now is at an all-time level of insanity, which I know we're going to get into. And so without getting too deep in it in the book, I reference it. I'm trying to be very, very careful because everybody's so offended by everything, right? I want this to reach a huge audience. I'm just sort of like, I don't know. I'll probably piss off a lot of people like I normally do, but so I could go on, but that's kind of it covers a lot of territory. Also, where religions, patriarchy, where those dark agendas have come through, manipulating ancient texts, and about the mother energy and how that relates to the father energy. A lot of this kind of stuff gets criticism and very projected upon as being new age crap when this couldn't be more ancient. So I'm just trying to lay it all out there. So it's got a lot of my own personal stories. Some are very transparent of going through sort of the underworlds and how important that is sometimes in order to traverse a lot of the programmings, that you almost have to die and come back and just be like, I'll do whatever it takes to not be overly exposed to this, but sometimes it means you got to dig real deep, and some of those rabbit holes can take you even deeper than you expected when you're up against nothing but attack and criticism, and also being pre-targeted before birth, not into like My Labs or MK Ultra or ritual abuse, but targeted to go off planet. And where that relates to some information I found that helps me to answer questions as to why I would have been picked to go. So yeah, it's pretty wild. But as I edit it, I'm just like, wow, it's been a long time coming, and I feel it'll be a good thing to read in the here and now. And I just hope that it reaches a lot of people that are really confused during this time, because what is really encouraging is not just new agey, fluffy unity consciousness or Christ consciousness that should be misunderstood, but really understanding that the true teachings taught people how to be Christed beings and what it means to integrate polarity, and how that relates to the planetary grid network and how that's been manipulated, and how important it is to have compassion and not be in the conquer and divide. No matter what people's choices are, let's not go into like the right and wrongs. I feel truth stands at a greater frequency that has to do with unconditional love and the power to create alchemy and the power to de-weaponize the weapons so that we can really move into higher earth energies and mitigate the damages coming through bioweapons, 5G, and all the different mechanisms that are used to assault us and compromise us, that we can override when we choose to break free of the social engineering. I feel when we free our minds, the body will follow regardless of what we've been inhaling or been subjected to, because they wouldn't bother with the social engineering if the weapons, the dark weaponry was enough. They require the dark weaponry to work by us buying into what we see on the TV and the fake news with all these projects behind them, like Project Mockingbird. So
yeah, when you talk about the frequency of truth, it's amazing if you could tap into the frequency of truth. It really, I can't think of a bigger aid to your discernment, because you can just kind of see through things. It's either resonating there or it's not. But it does seem like we've entered into a time where if you haven't dealt with your shit, you're going to, whether you want to or not. And it's coming up for a lot of people and manifesting in a lot of interesting ways. But I don't think there's any getting around it. You got to go straight through it.
No, unless you want to be further ensnarled into giving your power away, into numbing it and masking it, avoiding it, being in a survival energy to where, that greater initiation is handed over to somebody else because it's so uncomfortable. Those that are really on board are going to face it head on. And it's a feeling of reunion. It's a feeling of, transformation and healing, but it can be very uncomfortable at times. And so, yeah, I mean, truth is a frequency. When you have discernment, when your bullshit meter is really working and you're living your truth and your authenticity, it's going to be easier to see through the lies. When you're not living in your truth, and you're more a groomed subpersonality that has been conditioned and indoctrinated by just everything from the television to school systems, like we're seeing. I mean, doctors are asking 9-year-olds. I just saw this on Rumble or BitChute, and this father's just freaking out. And we know these kind of things are happening, but every story, it's like you can never get used to it. A doctor is asking a 7-year-old and 9-year-old, what do you identify with, being a boy or a girl? And are you binary or non-binary or whatever? I don't even, a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old. I mean, so it's going to take the parents retaliating and standing up against it and pulling their kids out. It's been so infiltrated. Not to say there aren't white hats, not to say that there aren't people like RFK Jr. And I'm afraid to say any names. Well, not his, but you know, I mean, I'm not afraid to say him. I just don't know. I've lost my channel. They won't let me back on. Because I'm a bullier and harasser on YouTube. It's like I'm banned for life. And I'm like, show me the video that you're talking about. I'm all about love and unity, and that's probably the problem, right?
Right. Yeah,
well, that
there
exact
are a lot of positive developments, but it's going to come down to us. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, we have a friend. We do a show with him monthly. His name's Michael Della Rocca from Our Everyday Lives. And he let me know a few days ago that his channel was taken down. And I went to it and took a picture and sent it to him. And it's that exact thing. So it's interesting that you said that. How recently was your channel taken down?
A couple months ago.
Okay. So it's the same,
Yeah.
It's the same thing. So I just found that interesting.
Yeah, it's not a strike. Yeah, it's not a warning.
They just immediately, there was nothing. They just took the whole thing down. Is that what happened to you?
Whole thing down. I had one warning. The other strikes had expired, and it was, yeah, you're banned. Hold on. I could do a quick share screen. I mean, I know it's no news to anybody to see what that looks like, but
You think of
just so you can see.
the reaction to the Sound of Freedom.
That's it.
Yeah, that's the one.
That's the one.
Just all these hit pieces coming out
I've
against.
written to them.
Yeah.
I know. I've written to them. I've appealed. They said, nope, we've looked over your channel. And I'm like, give me my content back then. Show me which videos. But anyway, yeah, Sound of Freedom. Go ahead.
Oh, just that there's so many hit pieces against something that, you know, it's really odd that people would have such strong disagreements about saving children. and it's just getting to the point where the truth, I mean, they're just terrified of the truth. The Matrix is crumbling in a lot of ways. And I think that authenticity has its own frequency as well. But I think it's a little scary for folks because much of our lives has been illusory. And we're addicted to those illusions. We're addicted to that matrix in a lot of ways, and all the fear and everything else that comes with it, just out of habit as much as anything. So it's kind of like kicking a bad habit in a way, getting out of the matrix.
Oh, it is. I mean, it starts so young and it's passed down generation to generation. I mean, these dark technologies that have impacted the planetary grid network and the loss of our galactic memories and the manipulation of DNA and the junk DNA that is scrambled fire letters that basically show that there is no integration of polarity. It's been very out of balance, and that makes us very vulnerable to archonic parasites and different influences that use our fear and what comes through different events that mostly very much are engineered, not all of them, but is to create that loosh to feed on. And people are addicted to giving it away as much as they're addicted to stealing it, because it's just so ingrained in people. It's what they feel reality is. And I'm surprised there's not more. I mean, I'm not saying I'm any, like, got some great, but I never went to, I mean, I literally, a lot of it was just because I was going through a breakup and I was just too heartbroken to go to school, but I was a terrible student. I had the worst attendance. And I used to just, I wanted to raise my hand all the time. I'm like, what is the point? And I would just question all this stuff. And then I just went and hit the library and educated myself after all the stigmas of, you have learning disabilities, you have ADD, you've got dyslexia. You know, I'm like, really? Because I don't want to sit here and listen to you, like, just tell me this stuff. And yeah, so I mean, I had my own issues that weren't so much being programmed. But when I see the resistance of people wanting to look at this, what amazes me is that mind control overrides mother-father instinct. I don't care if you have kids or not. We're talking about future generations. We're talking about our children. If there's not a instinct in your intuition, in your soul, in your emotional body, in your capacity to tap into what it means to be a protector, and that mind control overrides it, or that social engineering. That is damn scary, that it's got this much power over people, because any innocent life, even adults that are still struggling through the targets or the manipulations, doesn't really matter. Anybody turning a blind eye to it, it's like, I can't say it's a judgment thing. That wouldn't be fair. But yeah, I mean, it is an addiction. And it's too much of a death for people to begin to see that the very institutions that they dedicated their lives to, that they were rewarded by with their certificates and degrees, are wishing to compromise us, depopulate a certain number, and enslave the rest. I mean, that's a really, really harsh thing to look at, because to me, it's like a false parent that you've adopted as a true authority that actually cares about you. So therefore, let's listen to this false parent archetype. And it shows up everywhere, in politics, in the doctors and the teachers that are buying into this, that are playing along and going with it. And I think this false sense of security, it could be due to their own trauma or parent issues, or just that their parents rewarded them for going along with it, that it's become such a part of their psyche and self-esteem that to pull it away is such a death to them. When I say, you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, why don't you take those skills and abilities, turn it in the direction of working with communities, starve that beast, use those abilities for the service to humanity, and just know that a lot of us are doing this. And what are you afraid of? A lot of different doctors and nurses and teachers have stood up. They're ostracized by their communities. They're censored and banned. But is the fear of that going to override saving lives and protecting children? That's what boggles me. And I can safely say that when I walked away from different things I didn't agree with, things that were going to compromise me, maybe it was a job that I just could tell there's something not right. It was just exploiting people. Or relationships that I knew were toxic, even though, you hope you can heal it, you do whatever you can. I probably stayed in those for far too long. But when you walk away and you're true to yourself, that's when the magic and synchronicities begin to flow, because you're answering to your soul, you're answering to your truth, which is being authentic, which is saying, I've got integrity, I've got values, I've got principles, and it's not worth contributing to this insanity and these dark crimes. Why aren't people thinking about the long-term implications of turning a blind eye and being in denial? Okay, there's the ones that are in denial, and they're the ones that know this is going on and just are too frightened. So that's why my book is hoping to appeal to them without being like for or against, like more like, there's a lot of blackmail. A lot of people are scared, and I just know with just what we're just trying to express here, it doesn't do well to be in that divide and conquer when people are that afraid. The thing is, they haven't really prepared either. And if they have children, what if they lose that paycheck? So I think more thriving communities that are off the grid or getting land and pulling resources together will have the open arms to begin to help those people unwind and recover, on top of recovering from what they've ingested or put into their body that they thought was the right thing to do. The manipulation levels are on an all-time, insanity level. And there's certain family members that I can't talk to about this, that I'm surprised. And I'm like, you did not hear your I don't even want to people figure out which family members I'm talking about, but did Eisenhower not warn us in his final speech? It's like, oh my God. Anyway,
they're pulling out
and warnings came from multiple people.
Yeah.
And look at us today saying the same kind of thing. It's like, it's a frightening. It's worse than a heroin addiction. What are people afraid of? What are people afraid of? Okay, money, that currency, Babylonian slave, whatever currency, Illuminati money. I just don't I do get it, but I don't get it. We were all stuck in front of the television, right? We are all put in the same school systems. Why are we able to see through it? We have a lot of colleagues and friends that have been rewarded by that system, that have utilized those gifts and abilities and skills to bring about truth. We have enough of one another to feel a connection with, to not feel so alone. And I remember feeling alone in it, but I wasn't going to back down. I knew that I'd be meeting soul family and like-minded people like yourselves.
Yeah, me too. And this consensus consciousness that seems to be really prevalent, particularly on the left, so to speak. It's all these division tactics, and the one that really stands out is this obsession with race. And you mentioned the memory wipe. And you mentioned, division and the addiction to this false paradigm, but that really gets this whole identity thing really gets people caught up in being something that they're not. But if you had memories of your previous lives, you've probably been every one of the other races,
Oh,
and so
yeah.
I don't
If you want,
I don't think we'd talk about it very much, would we? Because we'd remember all our experiences in all different forms. So but I think that one is a particularly effective divider. And
oh yeah. Well, it's the victim consciousness, and they literally are targeting where the weak points are. I mean, I redundantly say, go back to the 80s. Okay, so maybe folks like you and I grew up in the 70s, 80s, 90s, saw all this transition in our later years to what kids are being exposed to. But I remember that, yeah, there was an epidemic based in the same person, Fauci, who developed these bioweapons to go after a certain number of the population based in their sexual orientation or their race, right? So we see the same guy in charge of what's been going on, but nobody's connecting those dots. And people are putting it out there. They don't want to look at it. The guy's like Rat Boy's father. He's just like,
yeah,
you can just see it in his energy. Remember Rat Boy? Anyway, it's not really that funny, but so when one looks at this and how he tortures animals and does these experiments and this and that, and all these names, I don't really want to name them. You would think that after the 80s, after civil rights, after so many people who are African American have reached some high level successes, that the perception would be a little bit different. I know there's still a lot going on in the inner cities. There's a lot of dysfunction still. There's a lot to want to advocate for. But when you say Black Lives Matter, it just seems to feed into victim consciousness. It's not recognizing not only do we have past lives and we shouldn't be suffering because we're white, because of white privilege. What about, the amount of people we know, and even times in my life, and even as an adult, of being homeless and having to go on welfare and food stamps. Okay, maybe it's no comparison, maybe because of my color. No, but I could complain about being a female, and look at what they've gone through throughout history. So this attack on the white male is completely unfair, because it's pitting every victim consciousness that's ever lived through a certain kind of history against them. If we look at the larger picture, how many genocides and Holocausts have there been? We're talking Ireland, we're talking the Essenes, we're talking the Celtics, right? And they were white men and women and families. I mean, the mass genocide and Holocaust have hit about every race except for the global elite that is behind it. So I don't quite understand how we can pit it towards one race, and especially when you look at who George Floyd was. And then there's children dying and in the news, and this movie coming out, and people are complaining, and there's not a huge uprising of people saying this is absolutely unacceptable. When people in Hollywood were calling out the pedophiles, there's no real coverage, and we know why. So why aren't the people that were being outraged about George Floyd, why aren't they outraged about this? So I feel that because it's a time of healing and coming to terms with your wounds and your triggers, that because they're playing that to divide us and use that as a way to be in conflict with each other, that that's a very important thing to talk about. And I probably said things to offend people because it's not coming out right. But one of my favorite documentaries or docuseries is The Ghost Inside My Childhood. It's exactly what you just said. This 7-year-old or 5-year-old boy is having night terrors. He's a white little boy, right? And he keeps saying, I was in a fire in Chicago and I fell to my death, and my name was Pam, and I was African-American woman, and the parents are just like completely skeptical. And then they research it and they're like, he's having night terrors. I got to take him seriously and actually see if this fire did happen. They look it up, they go to the library, and they see a fire in Chicago with a woman named Pam, who's a Black woman, who fell to her death. That this 4-year-old or 7-year-old, something in between that range, white boy is remembering.
Yeah.
So that's a perfect example, that show of how many different races, how many different traumas we've gone through. And in moving into higher earth energies and unity consciousness, aren't we here to love one another and heal? And if they're talking about the rainbow with being gender neutral or being whatever you feel you want to identify with, why isn't that across the board? And why is that being pushed on our children? Why aren't these red flags for people? This wokeism, it's so uncomfortable to see it in the world. I just want to like sometimes just move off and be in a cave and not even look. It's just,
Well, it's so
but then
apparently manipulative. It's so grotesquely so, you know, like the conversation about 200-year-old slavery is encouraged, but God forbid you talk about slaves on the planet today. And there are more today than there have ever been. It's a real problem that really
human trafficking, pedophilia.
Yeah, but you don't dare talk about it in polite company, or someone's going to have a problem with it. And
Well, you know
so
what?
that's
Have a
what I'm saying
problem.
about it being so transparently manipulative on every level. And
It's beyond.
you know, I think with the Bud Light thing and a lot of this other stuff, we've seen it roundly rejected by certain folks. I'd say the majority of folks, more and more. And it's also putting a spotlight on this, what is it, ESG score or whatever, that these companies are willing to throw away billions in order to, you know, have the right what is social credit identity or something. And I mean, that to me tells me that this economy is done for and they know it. And this is more about that future that they've designed. But yeah, enough with the manipulation already.
Oh yeah, and there's slave trade, humans going into secret space programs, being MyLab, being trafficked to billionaire families. And yeah, that's a lot for people to swallow, but to live so much on the surface and to avoid so much of this deeper stuff. It's not a contest of who's the bigger victim. It's about looking at every level of enslavement, the enslavement of the mind through all these, you know, different tactics, mind control, these different projects that have been around for quite some time, moved into our American governments and spread its tentacles all over the world, of, you know, MK Ultra, Project Monarch, where celebrities and people in leadership positions, political positions, have been trauma-based mind control. Don't you want to know who these leaders are that are manipulating? Wouldn't you want to listen to somebody that was in those families that saw it firsthand? I mean, and the thing is, they always have a cover scandal to cover up when this kind of news comes out, which doesn't come out in the mainstream, but it comes out on the internet. Like when a book is released, there's usually some, like we saw the Washington, D.C. Press Club featured somebody named Robert Orsi, or Robert Earl White. That's another name he goes by to just have an account on social media. He had a UFO crash in his backyard in New Jersey years before, right? And right as that event's going on, there's the one in Vegas. And I asked him directly because there was the David, what is his, Gruch, who was the whistleblower, Grush.
Oh, right.
And he was talking about, you know, this being a legitimate thing, and he said a lot of important things, but why did that happen right at the same time that all these people were meeting in DC? And that's just one example. That's what his assessment was, what he shared, because he looked into it and he, you know, could tell all the anomalies, which when things hit the news tend to have anomalies, like we see with false flags. And there's that sort of disclosure that we're going to get through maybe these news outlets that isn't the kind of disclosure that we want. It needs to come through the people and the researchers and the whistleblowers and the experiencers, because whatever they know that we're ready to face as a humanity, whether we're ready or not, but ready to speak about and expose, there's that inversion or that false ascension, false disclosure timeline that, you know, could also include a fake alien invasion and some kind of blue beam thing. Some people don't think that's going to happen, but this is the trajectory people are going down by not digging deeper. If you're only looking at the news, that's only as far as you're going to get. As far as, you know, it's like the school systems. You're only going to believe this stuff unless you grew up learning about it. How can people not figure that there's mass cover-ups?
Well,
Nobody explored 9/11 or the Kennedy assassination enough. I mean, that should have been the beginning of way more people awakening than the small that did.
And I think the veils are getting a lot thinner, and I think people are seeing a lot more. You know, take that lady on the plane, you know, recently that said that that man's not human. You know, we can only, you know, we can only talk about what she may or may not have seen, but you know, that the same thing happened in the UK with another fellow on a plane. And I think more and more people are just seeing things that were previously, I don't know, cloaked from our sight.
And there, I will say that one person that was on the plane did say, for those that don't know, that this person's eyes, instead of wink, because this being winked at this guy, well, the wink wasn't this way, the wink went sideways, and that's what That's what, and he didn't realize it. I mean, he realized it, but it didn't really sink in till later when he was really thinking about it, and it hit him. And he sees this video going viral, and then he was like, "Oh my God!" So
I think that's why they're really stepping up a lot of their fake efforts. The Elizondo and all these CIA trolls that are trying to talk about their experiences and that they have been abducted and whatnot. I think it's because they know that we're in a time now where people are gonna see these things, and they'd rather beat us to the punch on the explanation.
Right. And that's exactly what I was trying to say. And you said it in like one sentence. I tend to say things in many sentences. Yeah.
Well,
Totally.
good. Yeah. It makes me wonder what's next, but it's not boring. That's for sure. What an
No,
exciting
it's not.
time to be alive.
Well, it's amazing that Sound of Freedom just did so well in the box office. And and I do agree, I might sound just sort of ranty and just at a loss at times about how few still don't get it, but the numbers that do, the amount of people that do, the ones that are waiting on the fact that they do till that right moment to maybe say something or act or change their life or walk away from certain things. I mean, there's a time to just kind of process through that, because consciousness moves a lot quicker than physical density. So when something awakens or our perspective changes, sometimes it takes a bit for the physical to catch up. And sometimes it's not something that we can just do right off the bat without creating a lot of risk for ourselves and our families. But it's something that eventually synchronicities will support, and things will begin to fall into place. Solutions will be made. People will reach that breaking point where I can't continue in this way anymore. I know too much. And we all know, I'm sure a lot of listeners, what that feels like. So I feel when consciousness shifts and awakens, the physical takes a while to catch up with it. But as long as that consciousness changes, it changes how you manifest. You're no longer in this dependency bond with an inverted system. You've now pulled a part of yourself back from it. And that part of yourself that you pulled back is your creative energy that holds intent, that holds, your visions, your goals, your dreams, and a greater purpose that will begin to ignite when you realize this is the greatest purpose that we could begin to acknowledge being here on the human level, where people have been duped into, the American dream, having that car, having that success, having all this, having all that, at the expense of exploiting people and not paying attention to the massive injustices, the crimes against humanity, and all that are starving in the world that, our resources should be able to reach, and geoengineering should be able to address as being a technology used for the good and not for the negative. If those technologies exist, they could be steered in the right direction, as we know. So there's a lot of strong advocates out there. They're advocating for things that I feel aren't the priority right now. Doesn't mean it's not important, but how much are you looping in your own wound and finding that the outer solution is bringing you further down a dark road? I appreciate people that embrace their masculine and feminine. I think we're here to integrate polarity. Men are here to get in touch with their inner feminine. Maybe that'll change the way they relate to their girlfriends or wives or their same-sex relationships. And women are here to not be victimized and be in exile, but to embrace that warrior spirit. But does that mean, this isn't being weaponized right now at a young age for people to be like, you should get surgery if you're in touch with your emotions, if you like to wear pink? Is that too premature? And again, it's sort of redundant. I know people know this, anybody watching. I mean, when my sister put gum in my hair as a kid and I cut it all off, nobody could tell if I was a boy or a girl, right? And so I would trick the boys when I went to YMCA camp, and I'd be like, yeah, my name is Chris, right? And we'd be playing with Tonka trucks, and I was like their best friend. And then my mom came and picked me up, and I was like 8 years old. She's like, Laura. And they were like looking around like, who's Laura? And then I'm like, it's me. And then they were so like almost traumatized. They're like, oh my God, we just hung out with a girl all day. But I was like, because nobody can tell if I'm a boy or a girl, I might as well have fun with it. Because I got so sick of people asking me. And I lived in the trees, and I was what would be considered a tomboy. But if I went to the doctor and they asked or tried to manipulate me into thinking this, or my mom agreed to it, and we know, I mean, that is the most detrimental thing that you can do to a child, because we're pretty androgynous.
Yeah.
When we're children anyway. And just because I wasn't going for the female programming of, the Barbies and that kind of thing, I feel like they're rebelling against a previous generation that had its own social engineering to recover from. And instead of just being authentic and embracing whoever you are at any stage of the game, it shouldn't come with denying or learning from the physical body that you were given or that you chose. Isn't that a part of our greater soul development? You know, maybe you were a woman for the last 5 lifetimes, came in as a man. Why over-identify with something to the point of doing surgery, unless you're like later in life and you really can't stand it, and you, I mean, and I'm being redundant, we all know this. I didn't mean to use myself as an example, but the thing is, it's like, I'm sure I've been a man in a bunch of lifetimes, but I came in with this body, and I'm going to learn to appreciate it or make fun of it when it's not acting the way I want.
Even in this lifetime, though, Laura, don't these people remember what it was like to be a kid? I mean, you know, from the time that I was born to about age 13, I didn't really have a sexual impulse. I didn't really think about it. I didn't have the hormones that kind of kicked that behavior in. There was none of that. 13 happened. Boy, it came on full force. But prior to that, I was just a kid. And these kids are just kids. My dad was one of the most masculine men you'd ever meet, and he played with dolls when he was a kid, you know, and then he went into the army, and then he became a star football player, and, you know, incredibly masculine guy. It's like these are not indications of anything other than an imagination, and we should be envious of how wonderful our imaginations are when we're children. And we should leave that alone and respect it, and not impose this ridiculous obsession with sexuality and division.
Criminal.
Yeah, it's
criminal.
It is criminal. It's child abuse.
I mean,
that's the advice to parents. Just remember what it was like when you were a kid.
Oh, I know. And
I mean, I play with remember.
Yes, I do. I absolutely do. And some of the best. Yeah. I mean, you have your imagination, and you can, you know, I mean, and this is the thing, we see women, you know, doing things that might be more considered masculine and in certain arenas. That doesn't create any confusion. It's just that women are more capable of what they've been credit for, and men are too, in being able to embrace fatherhood and playing with dolls. And isn't that what being a father is? Wouldn't you want to embrace that side of yourself? Wouldn't you want to embrace having emotion and feeling that has been sort of robbed from, you know, a male expression? And this is where we have an opportunity to create breakthroughs instead of adopt the next level programming, which is way worse than what our generation had. I mean, I could observe it on television and still like be entertained without judgment of it. I'm just like, well, you know, I probably wouldn't go down that road, but I you know, I still appreciated that, you know, even if, you know, women or men find themselves in all of that, when you really get to know somebody beyond the world of realm of experience, what do you call it? The world of appearances, right? And just the surface stuff. That's usually when you fall in love or you find really good friends, and, you know, you're not just what it looks like on the surface. So I feel like social media and encouraging our kids to just live on the surface and not, you know, parents need to encourage rebelliousness in these times, or to pull them out of school completely, because it's danger. This is where the warfare is. This is the spiritual warfare is going for our kids.
Yeah,
sorry, I'm jumping all over the place, but you know what I mean.
I used to love playing with tomboy girls because they like to do boy stuff. They like to climb trees and catch turtles, and, you know, all the really fun.
We would have been great buddies as kids.
Yeah, but you know, now these tomboy girls are suddenly convinced that they're lesbians, and their whole future is kind of carved out for them, and it's just sinister and wrong.
Insanity.
I mean, all the tomboy girls that I knew, I mean, they you know, they went on to have families and productive lives and whatnot, and you know, it had no bearing other than they were really good at climbing trees.
You know, there should never be any convincing at all. I mean, regardless, I mean, that's for you to explore. And, you know, schools should have, I don't know. Schools should be closed down right now until somebody else is in charge but yeah, I mean, to convince anybody of anything or to normalize things. And I'm not saying same-sex relationships shouldn't be anything but normalized, but where is it pushed on you? Where are you being asked to decide something at such a premature time, to the point when you do decide it, that doctor from that point on that you might visit every time and that school teacher that is giving you all this material to begin to really say, well, maybe that's what this means. This is a time of awakening, and they're targeting this generation from awakening to the previous programs of the generation before. And that's what's so sad, right? Totally. So
Yeah.
you're going to say,
Well, I wanted to bring something up that Scott's been wondering, and you mentioned RFK Jr. at the start. And so you want to bring up something?
Well, I
I
don't
think
know. I mean, I really like the anti-vax sentiment. I've always had a thing for the Kennedys, and I was super excited about RFK, but I'm a little disappointed with what I've heard, because it's more or less just the usual Democrat tropes and whatnot. Anti-gun and big government, and very pro-Israel, which came as a surprise to me, given that he kind of has an idea of who was responsible for his father's death and his uncle's death. And yet, maybe that's just because you need Israel's approval to get the nomination. I don't know, but I don't know. It's an odd time for a Kennedy to enter the sphere, I think. I'm interested to see where it goes, but yeah, I am a little disappointed. What do you think?
yeah, it's always something I could never seem to wrap my head around. But yeah, I think there's a certain aspect of, that being a part of not stirring up too much, as far as it's like, what can you get away with and what would be too difficult? I mean, I use Eisenhower as an example because that's the one I'm most familiar with. But when he wasn't able to turn around certain things, there was actually an unconditional surrender agreement to the Nazis that took place in 1952 that nobody in this disclosure community really talks about. Maybe some do, but that basically meant that he wasn't able to sign any treaties. But every president since him had to sign something because you had no choice. There was no negotiation. There was no way to go against it. It was actually like a treaty established that, and I have like a better sort of quote to explain that you really just had no choice. So what he did, because he didn't want to go along with it, was do a lot of things covertly in his connection with Val Thor and their alliance, to set up positive military and different things that wouldn't be revealed till later on, because of needing to protect some of these missions and some of these activities that now a lot of individuals have come forward with immunity to be able to talk about it. So I feel somebody like RFK Jr., especially with, Kennedy's administration being briefed by Eisenhower, having the assassination and seeing both his father and uncle become assassinated. I think because there's so much that's locked into place that you can't do a whole lot about. It's not like the unconditional surrender agreement really went away. It's just, I feel because of what he knew that has been passed down, because from what I've come to understand is that administration not only briefed Kennedy, but also the Trump administration about certain things. And I don't know how much they're going to work together or what they both know and what might be different about what they know. But I feel that what we hear on the surface, as much as he's advocating for a lot of things that are hard to share on the surface, it might for him go too far to be able to say much else. But that doesn't mean that he's not doing something that'll eventually be revealed that is more in alignment with what needs to be done, that is not in public awareness just yet. And I hope I shouldn't be saying that. I did ask Dan Cooper, is it okay if I share about the unconditional surrender agreement? And he said at this point, yes, it's absolutely important. So this is just speculation. I don't have any proof, but because of who he is, because of what he stands for, I feel that, you're not going to know everything on the surface from these individuals, because it would stir up too much and threaten too much. Look at what happened to the last administration.
Yeah.
But there are still ties to all that we know about, right? And that's where it gets confusing. So that's not the best answer. And I hope I didn't say anything that probably shouldn't be brought up, but do you get what I'm kind of saying?
Yeah.
I feel all
let
the
me
ones
frame this.
out for humanity, everything they do on the surface is not exactly what they're doing behind the scenes, I guess.
Correct. I think that's well said.
If we're looking at, so the UFO file is by far the biggest secret our government has. I mean, this is, this was behind the Kennedy assassination. This is behind so much. It really is the most protected set of materials out there. That being said, the biggest threats to the system have been well, Kennedy, and we saw what happened there. And then Trump, obviously they're fighting him tooth and nail with everything they've got. Two guys that are very much going against the grain. Where's the connection, or what was it, do you think, that Eisenhower had to say in that briefing that might, illuminate the terrain a little bit with regard to how much backlash this system has against those gentlemen?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if Eisenhower had to sort of on the surface agree to something that he didn't want to agree to, and what he noticed about the different individuals that were put in certain positions that he's taken the blame for later in history. I mean, I just think I just talked to Alex Collier, and he said they'd spend hours on the golf course and Eisenhower would just brief him. I think it had a lot to do with MJ-12 and how he lost control of the situation, that these projects had taken place. But I think Kennedy was very privy to that sort of thing, because Kennedy's listed as a Illuminati family. It doesn't mean that he was ever compliant to it. I think because he went rogue and he was not maybe experiencing that family in the way that other family members were. I don't know how, and I don't have enough proof about any of this to be able to speak accurately. But he is listed, and so are the Shrivers. Okay, and there's a lot of different families listed. So if he was more going rogue and more of an advocate, he already had some sort of oath that you're kind of born into, or as a part of the different family pact, the different family pacts. I think that might have had something to do with it, because he was willing to call everything out. The Federal Reserve, just money, just connections with the banks, just things about the ETs and UFOs and a lot of the down crashes that were more than just the crashes. God only knows the enormity of what Eisenhower exposed to him. And the fact that he was open and listening put him in a very dangerous position, because they thought he would be an individual that they could control. And so they had to knock him out because of all that he was going to expose. And then from that point forward, the Office of Presidency was groomed by 3-letter organizations. So I feel that after the Second World War, they wanted to use presidents as pawns, and there were some that they just couldn't use in that way. And that the Unconditional Surrender Agreement, with the infiltration of these Nazi scientists and people placed in all these different high-level positions all over the place, would have been able to suppress this, because he was going to fire Alan Dulles, wasn't he? I mean, he was going to do all sorts of things to really cause a lot of stir in those that I think thought that they would be able to kind of capture him. And again, there's so many holes in what I'm sharing as far as his family background. All I know is that when he was, I think, I don't know if he went through trauma-based mind control. Most family members have, but a lot of individuals that we know about have overcome that. And for all I know, there was a way in order to help him through Eisenhower's relationship with Val Thor and some of these more benevolent groups that he connected Kennedy to, for all I know. So this is all speculation. What do you guys know? I mean, what do you think?
I don't know much about Val Thor. Maybe you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, Val Thor warned the Truman administration about the Nordics and the Greys, and when the Nordics started to create an alliance with the Nazis back in 1929, and he warned about the Nordics and the Greys. When you hear the other narratives being steered, which I don't think what I'm sharing right now is a narrative, it could potentially be the truth, because of the sources I've gotten it from and the validation from people that would know. So when we hear about first contact being with the Nordics and then the Greada Treaty with the Greys, that completely is different information. So Val Thor, supposedly starting in 1952, created this warning, started to form an alliance with Eisenhower, 1953, 1954. 1954, Eisenhower invaded Dulce underground base. This is different than the Phil Schneider one in 1979. And they lost that battle. Admiral Byrd going to Antarctica was not successful. So all these different attempts to go and bring the First Army into these bases, including in 1958 with Area 51, none of these things were successful. So with what Eisenhower knew, and with his alliance with Val Thor, who went rogue, it wasn't a part of some of these other benevolent groups that had signed a non-intervention agreement. What I've come to find out is Val Thor went rogue. Later, he was put on VIP status at the Pentagon. And I feel he influenced Eisenhower's final speech. I believe that from Frank Strange's book and from a lot of other testimony from reliable sources, particularly Dan Cooper, and Elena Denon mentioned it in her book about Val Thor, that they created and kept up a friendship. And if he got close to Kennedy and he was briefing Kennedy, I would assume or think that Val Thor would be a part of it, representing a more benevolent aspect of like how everything came about, as far as the more positive military, the Earth Alliance, and how Val Thor helped connect him with the Guardians and put the sphere, the barrier, the sphere barrier around the Earth in 2014 to ensure that they would not be able to leave, that the Dracos and the ICC Nazi Draco Alliance would not be able to exit the Earth. So I would figure if him and Kennedy were close, he would be briefed by this also about the different characters in these organizations and groups, these not think tanks, but these, like Bilderberg Group, the Council of Foreign Relations, MJ12, the three-letter organizations. I think when they put their heads together, Kennedy probably knew a lot. Eisenhower was able to perhaps connect him into Val Thor, and maybe because I've heard about Val Thor's technology, if you take him onto a ship, they are able to clear and actually repair DNA in a major way. So, whoa, isn't that like, that's just coming out of like, God, what if? I mean, I would have to find out a lot more to be certain of all of that. But I mean, this is where Eisenhower was at when him and Kennedy spent a lot of time together. So I don't know, what Kennedy went through as a family member, and the family members that exist to this day, if they have anything to do with that kind of thing.
Exactly.
But all I know is they've done more for humanity than any of these other ones.
Yeah.
So, and just like being good friends with Kathy O'Brien, folks like Laura Worley have been through these projects and programs. It is possible to completely overcome it all. So that's kind of a bit of my assessment, that I don't have anybody to back me up at this moment, but it sort of makes sense to me with everything else I've learned.
I want your take on something, and forgive me if I brought this up with you before. I don't think I have, but so apparently there was a conversation between Judge Napolitano and Donald Trump, and they've always been good friends and close friends, I guess. And so there was a lot of pressure. Trump had agreed to declass the Kennedy file. I mean, he really didn't have much of a choice. That was the time it had expired. But when it came down to it, he told Napolitano he couldn't do it. Not completely. He just couldn't do it. And Napolitano got really irritated by this. He says, you have to do it. And he said, if you knew what was in that file, you would understand. I can't do it. And so ever since I heard about that story, I've been wondering what is in that file that even someone, a huge advocate for, bringing this stuff out in the open, suddenly decides I can't release that. What could that be? I wonder.
It could have been a little too soon. Maybe it's coming. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think everything's coming to the surface.
Had you heard about that conversation?
No, I wouldn't be able to speak on that very well. I want to find out more, of course.
Yeah, but just to speculate, I mean, I wonder what we know. There's a big tie-in with the UFO file and the Kennedys, and one could only assume that it would have to be something along those lines. So, I mean, I think it's a safe assumption.
Well,
maybe I'm reaching.
Well, I imagine if they're shutting people's channels down, like Laura and Michael Della Rocca, who's more into the spiritual and frequency and all that, if they're shutting his channel down, they probably are going to shut down something like that release for now.
Yeah, but the whole point that this was Trump's decision to make, and
Sure.
And it was kind of a shocking one, I think, given everything else that we know about his previous disposition about the Kennedy file. Oh, did we lose you, Laura?
No.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and yeah, I don't, everything's going to come to the surface. I feel on a more mainstream level, there's a shift of energy going on, as far as what we'll be able to gain access to, but it's something that, we can discover just on our own terms in what we, research or speculate at this point. But yeah, the censorship is out of control. It actually, I got banned the minute I mentioned the unconditional surrender agreement. What channel are you guys on? Am I putting your channel in danger?
Yeah.
I know you.
We're on
We'll be
Rumble.
on Rumble, yeah.
So I probably won't be putting
yeah.
it on YouTube. Probably just Rumble and BitChute, and then
Yeah, we haven't had the
Yeah.
best luck with YouTube, but
yeah, we're waiting for one more strike to fall off, and then but I'm still taking it easy.
well, and who wants to? It's not really dignified to play charades with your guests just to, to dodge the
Yeah.
algorithms.
Yeah, there's certain shows that fit, and there's some that don't.
Yeah.
I would probably rather, just keep this on Rumble and BitChute.
Yeah, thankfully we've got Rumble, and they seem to be a lot easier about this stuff
So far. Yeah.
Right.
So what do you think?
Yeah.
Are we heading for a big solar flash? It feels like we're coming up to something really big really soon, and that's just a gut feeling. And soon is relative term, but what do you think?
I more feel it's kind of a long, sort of drawn out thing. There might be something like that. As far as the dates or like when that would particularly happen. I mean, I think it has nothing to do with us on this sort of ground level, and also the necessity of a big event like taking place that would be more how cosmic forces and earthly forces have more to do with what's going on than New World Order, because ultimately you can't really have control over these things, and that some event would need to happen in order to, create, some kind of, huge shift. And that's why I feel like they're scurrying real fast and in a very accelerated way. And at the same time, I feel like their hand is being pushed by, I think, people like the White Hats, groups like that, Earth Alliance, and all the benevolent sort of, individuals that are speaking on behalf of, these other things that would want to accelerate things in order to have it sort of run its course and have their response not be in timing with how they would want to lay it out. And that there's a lot kind of going on there. People talk about it. I'm not into predictions. I just feel that our own sort of awakening and capacity to integrate the different, solar events that come through, human residents, or anything that has to do with the vibration of what we experience here on Earth, that, there could easily, be some kind of what do you guys think? I mean, I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer to that. I've always seen it as like kind of like a slow drip, that then could be, some kind of massive event that a lot of people wouldn't survive. And
like a dimensional bifurcation, right? I mean, I don't necessarily think people won't survive. It's just, in that bifurcation, there's going to be people that are going to remain in like a third density, and then those where that doesn't fit, and they move on to,
I definitely see bifurcation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely going to be casualties. There's people that are going to die, but, we die. That's part of being born, is that kind of goes along with it. But yeah, in a bifurcation, there's not a frequency match anymore, and people are going down one road, and they're experiencing an awakening in a much, much different way that might be much more long and drawn out. It might take till they are not in the physical anymore to have sort of a life review and reflect upon the things they might not have been able to wrap their heads around when they were on Earth.
Right.
And the more they get assimilated into AI, I don't feel that these souls are ever going to be kind of abandoned. But when we see different species trying to heal their genetics, I look at it like this is the trajectory a lot of humans are going down, that later on they might want to heal their genetics, because this is modification. This is genetic modification. And I feel that other species have experienced this before. I feel that those kind of coming in from future or other levels of future timelines to kind of come in, whether they provide warning, whether they help with the awakening, we see where that trajectory could potentially go for certain individuals. So one wouldn't be able to necessarily exist on the same timeline, but I feel like there's a bridge between the two timelines. That's why it's hard to just see one big event. For me personally, I feel that there's a lot of people that are still bridged between the bifurcation timelines. Some are ready to move on, and they're, on that organic ascension timeline. Some are still in service to those that might be compromised. They might want to help with med beds and healing centers and still advocating or speaking up. So when that event happens, there's going to be so many crimes against humanity being called out, and so many of these players that aren't going to get away with what they're doing anymore, that's why I see more of a bridge, and that a lot of souls will be able to jump over and have their DNA repaired from these bioweapons, because there's still such an opportunity for these individuals to still awaken, that I do feel, yeah, there's a bifurcation to a certain degree. But, I'm constantly just sort of like, the future is just kind of like, we're not going to all experience it the same way.
Right.
So yeah, to fix it to one possibility, I kind of look at just still the possibility of, this split taking place, but a lot of people are in agreement to not just all of a sudden you're not exposed to your friends and family that might be on that trajectory. I just feel a lot of people are called to move on, and some are going to continue to stick around. And then there's going to be continued rescue missions. And it doesn't mean they're going to come save the day, but there's this outer barrier that was put around the planet in 2014, connected to the guardians and the sphere beings. And what I've heard is that is going to remain for at least 100 to 1,000 years. And when it comes to certain individuals in the population awakening, it might take that long. And the fact that they're trapped here, the Draco, ICC, Nazi Draco Alliance, that they can't leave, they're sort of freaking out. So to know that those kind of individuals could possibly be freaking out when they don't seem to do anything but want to freak out individuals to harvest their energy or take their loosh, they're not able to exit when people really begin to wake up. And if they're continued to be called out, this strengthens the force of the more positive military, that some have been in alliance with them for a certain, time, that might be blackmailed or in such fear that they don't know how to release themselves from it, that if we can get out of the hatred and considering them all the enemy, we can even help those individuals break free, which would make their numbers smaller and easier to isolate from the ones that might have been completely abused or trauma-based mind control from the time of childhood. So I think we still have a lot of work to do in bringing all that to light. So maybe an event will happen sooner because it's just time. I don't know.
Yeah, could be. Well, gosh, I think we're getting close to an hour. I wanted to talk a little bit about your book. I'm excited. You said I could pre-order it today?
Oh no.
No,
not yet.
Okay.
There's a little bit. It's going to go into pre-sale soon. There's something has to be mildly fixed first, but it'll be out in March. And when it's ready for pre-sale, I'll definitely send you guys a text. And it just, it goes into all these sort of things. And what can we do in the face of it? How can we be the override frequency, knowing that spirit holds dominion over physical matter? We can reach higher frequencies in our own consciousness that override the dark technologies that wants to sink us into fear, pain, divide and conquer, and all these sort of things, that we are the more advanced technology than all this dark weaponry. How can we recognize more of where we're being played, come together more, and do the inner work, pay attention to, things that we didn't learn about in school, and open our minds to it at the very least, and take what resonates and leave the rest, so that you can walk away more activated in what your truth is, and which I feel is a prerequisite to unity consciousness, because you can't come together in unity when somebody wants to be the guru and the controller of thoughts, whether it's coming from a new agey guru type or anything that we've already seen. There's tons of hijacking everywhere. How can we represent ourselves and understand that true oneness is diversity and harmony, and that we can feel blessed by our differences, but at least be willing to look at where the mind control is getting in the way of us being authentic, and that kind of stuff, just goes all into my own path and Mars recruitment, and just anything that can help along the way, just my love and desire to do what I can to be in service to humanity.
Mars recruitment, that's a whole nother show I think we need to have. That sounds exciting.
Oh, well, anytime. I'd love to be with you guys.
Yeah.
And I'll have much more, I'm going to be pondering some of these other things that I'm wanting to get more clarity about too. And so, I can update some of the things that we talked about. So I appreciate you guys having me on. It's always so much fun to be with you and have these conversations.
Absolutely. Yeah, we love you.
And where can people find you and your work? Just before we end, we like to let people know exactly how they find our guests. So.
CosmicGuy.org is my website. I have a subscriber thing. I'm on Rumble, and I'll update it with the events that I have coming up. I'll be in England and Avebury and Glastonbury in August, and I will update information. I think tickets are still on sale, and so CosmicGuy.org. I pretty much have everything on there. And yeah, so thanks for listening and just having me.
Absolutely. Anytime.
We'll hang
Thank you
out
so much.
after. Yeah, we'll say
Yeah.
goodbye to the
Okay, wait.
audience. We love you,
Listen.
Laura.
Awesome. Love you too, guys. Bye.
Bye.